All right. So thank you everyone for coming and joining me today. I'm so happy that you were able to make the time during summer break to join us. We are going to be talking about some of the strategies in my book, Building Strong Writers. And this book is a culmination of 16 years in the classroom. I teach in Southern California and I've taught at two different districts. So I kind of feel like I know a little bit about how different things work in different districts. I've taught grades 9 through 12. I'm currently teaching honors sophomores, and I've taught everywhere from college prep, which is just our regular gen ed English. I've had EL inclusion classes, I've had special ed collaborative classes. And so a lot of the strategies that I use in my book, I initially started learning about a lot of EL strategies during the teacher ed programs in California because we have so many English learners in our classrooms. However, I quickly realized that so many of these strategies work not only with EL students and struggling writers, but they also work with all of our students. And so the book, Building Strong Writers, contains some of my most favorite strategies that I use. And today I'm really excited to share some of these with you. And I'm going to put a link into the chat. Now, this link that I am putting into the chat, it is a view only Google folder in Google Drive. And so just make any copies of anything that you might want and or need. But there's going to be a lot of stuff in here for you. I've got four different documents. One is an editable copy of the building concrete detail sentences, which is a strategy that I use in all my classes. One's color coded so you can see how I color code. And then also I've got a mentor text strategy and an editable 3 sentence prompt that you can change for any single short story that you do, and then you've got your first writing assignment. So I'll be sending this out via email, but I also just put that into the drive if you want to go ahead and take a look at that. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and I am having major flashbacks right now to COVID teaching on Zoom. I don't think I've done this since COVID. Um, but I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start some of the presentations. And if you have any questions, please add them um, into the chat. All right, let's see. Okay, 1 second. I did this on my other computer. And I didn't check it on this computer outside that I was using. Let me try that one more time. Let me share my screen. Here we go. All right, we're in business. All right, so here is our presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, but I'm also going to go ahead and pull up the chat so I can see that. I don't see the chat. Okay, so I'll go back and check on that as we go. All right, so here we go. So a couple things. Thank you for joining us. Please keep your audio on mute. If you have any questions in the chat, I will go back and look at it. And this is being recorded. All right, so this is all about Building Strong Writers, the book Building Strong Writers, Strategies and Scaffolds for Teaching Writing in Secondary ELA. And here are a few of the things that we are going to be taking a look at today with our agenda. I've got a list of effective writing strategies, all of which can be found in the book. We're going to be going over sentence frames, using sentence frames with a 3 sentence writing prompt, which that is my very first thing I do in the classroom. It's my go-to. And then also we're going to be taking a look at using these in the classroom. All right, so here's a list of some strategies that are in the book, and these strategies I start using as many as I can all at once in the very beginning of the school year, and then I slowly pull them back. So, mentor texts, color coding sentence frames, sentence starters, word banks. And the beautiful thing about this is that there's no student that's too young or too old for these strategies. They work for all of our students. So let's take a look at sentence frames as an effective and helpful strategy for teaching writing. And so this is just a little quote from the book about how it's a structured chunk of text with fill in the blank spaces for our students to add in their own thoughts. And there's oftentimes a lot of misconception about what a sentence frame really is. So, what it is, it's an effective strategy for teaching writing. It's a tool that helps learners organize their ideas, and it's a guide to help our students gain confidence in their writing. And what it's not, um, it's not dumbing down the work, and it's not doing the work for them. It's just giving them that structure, that frame for them to put their ideas in. And I found that ever since I started using sentence frames consistently, I have a lot less students who just sit there and don't know what to write. So there's three main benefits to using sentence frames, and it eliminates writer's block, or at least it helps eliminate writer's block. It helps students feel more confident in their writing, and also it helps our English learners develop stronger language skills. So basically, everything that I do in the classroom, I'm always keeping my EL learners in mind because teaching in Southern California, again, I have a lot of English learner students. And again, these strategies, they benefit more than just our EL students. Okay, so here's three sample sentence frames that we can use when we're writing about literature. So if we read a short story, or if we're in the middle of a book and we read a chapter, this is what I would provide my students with. And originally, at the beginning, all my students say you can use this as is, or if you feel like you can change it up, please go ahead and change it up. Actually, I really like it when the students feel empowered enough to change it up, because that means they're growing and they're gaining more confidence in their writing abilities. So here's number one. We'll go over number one. It says, the protagonist, and then a place for the character's name, changes throughout the story as a result of. And then, like, what is it? What's that change that helps the protagonist um, kind of, show that they're a dynamic character? So, what's the event? What's the conflict? And then, which reveals, and then what does it reveal about that character or that theme? So, I'm really guiding the students here to talk about dynamic characterization, to talk about how our characters grow through struggles and conflicts, and also while incorporating the theme as well. But I'm not telling them what to say. They are still doing the hard work here, which I think that is so, so important. Another one is the setting of the story contributes to the overall mood by. So, asking the student, how does the setting help contribute to this mood? How does the fact that the setting is a lone house on a hill at nighttime while it's hazy outside and it happens to be a full moon, like how does that contribute to the story, the mood? Um, Helping to emphasize, and then what emotion or what theme does that emphasize? So this would be an example of some of the sentence frames that I use with my students, and I tailor them to what I want them to write and or what I'm trying to get at. And I'll always use backwards planning to kind of build those skills along the way. But you can see how these sentence frames really help give the student an idea. They are starting to put in their thoughts, but I've already started the sentence and even continued it for them. And these sentence frames work for more than just literature. We can also use them for nonfiction when we're doing like a research essay, or if we're reading a memoir or just a nonfiction text. And so here's some sample sentence frames that I might use, what it looks like in the classroom. So I'd say in the article, and I'd give the title, and I'd say by who's the author. The main argument is that, and like, what's the main argument? which the author supports by using, how does the author support this main argument? And so there's a lot of critical thinking skills that go into the student adding in their thoughts here with these sentence frames. And then another really good thing about these sentence frames is that they're modeling correct grammar. They are modeling, especially for literature, writing in the literary present and keeping that consistent verb tense throughout the entire writing. So there's some sample sentence frames for nonfiction. And so, how do we make sentence frames more useful for our students? Because I can tell you that if I just threw a writing prompt up on the board and I handed out like a piece of paper with these frames, I wouldn't get the writing I was looking for. So there's some ways that we can incorporate these sentence frames into our classroom, in our instruction, that's going to make it a lot easier for our students to grow as writers. So my first tip is to share a sentence frame and model how to use it. And so I actually have one of the documents. We'll show you how to do this, but I will talk about like, hey, if I were writing this, this is what I would say. And I would model different ways. I would think aloud for my students as I was going through everything. And I would model how to use it. Another really good tip is to brainstorm with your students, your whole class, if possible, or have them in small little groups coming up with a list of ideas. But that group brainstorming is so important for them. So have students brainstorm possible ideas or words to put into each blank and have them talk with their peers about what they're doing and what they see. And that can be really, really helpful. And also that's brainstorming, that's group brainstorming. And it's a good way to stretch out over a couple days a short writing assignment, but to really make sure that all the students are ready for it. And then the third tip is to provide multiple sentence frames for the students to choose from. Sometimes I'll give them like two versions of the same sentence frame. It's just started differently. That way students can see how you play with words, how you can change your sentence structure by starting with different phrases or clauses at the beginning of each sentence. All right. And then so let's take a look at what this looks like because it always makes more sense when we have it together and we have it all like an example in front of us. All right, so here is a writing prompt, and I would use this for a 3 sentence prompt. And this is for Ray Bradbury's short story, The Veldt, which if you've ever read the story, students love it. It's a little eerie how similar and how much Ray Bradbury has kind of predicted the future with his dystopian texts. But if you haven't read The Veldt or haven't done The Veldt with your students, I highly, highly recommend starting your school year with this because it's so fun. But here's the prompt. It says, write a 3 sentence response about how Ray Bradbury uses descriptive language to develop the setting and conflict in the Veldt. And so this prompt has students doing a couple things. One, they're analyzing language. What kind of language are they analyzing? It's descriptive language. So they're going to want to know about sensory details and strong adjectives. Um, how to develop the setting and the conflicts. They're going to have to understand the setting, understand the conflict, and then connect how he describes those to create the ultimate effect. And so let's take a look at this prompt. And this is one of the documents that I shared with you. And you'll have this, it's in a Google Doc. You can make a copy of it and you can use it as is or change it for what you need to do. But I would recommend actually teaching the process with your students using this document and doing this with them before you kind of set them off on their own. So The Veldt, if you haven't read it, it's a pretty short story. What I like to do is I have my students listen to the story. I give them a piece of plain white paper. I throw the markers and the colored pencils in the middle of the table and I say, draw and write whatever you hear. And um, it's pretty remarkable because they pick up on the symbols and they pick up on a lot of the little nuances in the story just by making the sketch notes. But so then they have their sketch notes, they've listened to the story, and you can always go back and reread it. But then using those sketch notes, you use this prompt and the sentence frame and the sample to help model your expectations. So up at the top, I have the prompt, write a three-sentence response about how Ray Bradbury uses descriptive language to develop the setting and conflict in the veldt. And then I have an explanation of those three sentences. And we'll go over this a little bit more in just a moment. I need a parenthesis right there. But sentence one is the GTAP. My students, that is one of the first acronyms I teach them: genre, title, author, purpose. And basically, the purpose is you are answering the prompt. So you have to answer that prompt in that first sentence. Sentence two is you introduce the quote, you have the quote, and you cite it. And then sentence three is you explain how that quote shows the purpose. So, for the sake of this writing assignment, it's develops the setting and conflict through those descriptive language and sensory details. And so the students are really doing a lot here. And if you think about all of these skills, there's a lot of skills in these small three sentences that students are learning. And that's why I like the three sentences so much, because if they can master these skills in just three sentences, they're ready for an essay. And if you've never done a three sentence writing response in your classroom before, your students, you're going to notice at first, they're like, okay, cool, three sentences, I got this. And then they realize just how challenging these sentences are. And also, depending on your grade level, um, change up your scaffolding. I know for our middle school teachers, use this quote shows or this shows, especially for like sixth and seventh grade teachers. Like, that is developmentally appropriate for our students. That is where they are at. I have a middle schooler myself. He's going into eighth grade. And last year in seventh grade, he was at this quote shows and he needed that. But then as our students get older, so for our high school teachers, especially 10, 11, 12, and then transitioning in ninth grade, let's get rid of the this quote shows. And these sentence frames are really good at that. So right in the middle of the document, there's the sentence frames. That is their entire three sentence response for them in the short story title, author blank, strong verb blank to blank. And I'm also demonstrating here how you can use color coding with that first sentence, because the first sentence packs a punch. So I've got the genre in yellow, I've got the title in blue, the author in, no, the title in green, the author in blue, and the purpose in gray. And then you can kind of see how it all comes together. So the bottom part is there. So let's go ahead and break this down, because you have this document. You can make a copy of it. You can use it as is for your first lesson, or you can change it up to a story that you like better. All right, so here's the three sentences that you kind of already seen. Sentence one serves as the topic sentence. I've also found that it really is a building block for when they move to multi-paragraph essays for the thesis statement. Sentence two is just embedding the quote properly. I tell my students, I'm like, you can't have a naked quote. You have to put a shirt on and then put on some pants. And they always kind of like chuckle and laugh, but then you can point out like, hey, you have a naked quote. You need to introduce it and cite it. And then sentence three is just commentary. And even with honors students, my biggest struggle is getting them from summary to analysis. And that's another thing that these sentence frames help with. So here is the sample frame, and this is on that document that you have. This is exactly what I would give to my students. And I'd brainstorm with them in the short story title. Okay, students, what is the title? And they all shout it out. Author. And I'm like, okay, who's our author? And they'll shout it out. And I'm like, strong verb. Like, we need to brainstorm some strong verbs. And so this is a great time to talk about, the literary present, how we write about literature in the present tense. So strong verbs, uses, conveys, demonstrates, exemplifies. I'll put a whole list of these up on the board. And then two, uses what to what. So like maybe like uses descriptive language to what is he doing? He's creating the setting or establishing the conflict. And then here's the sentence two. For example, explain what's going on in the story to introduce the quote. Give me the quote inside it. And then author's name in possessive form. So Bradbury's use of what? His use of descriptive language enhances the story setting because. So we would definitely want to help students with that by modeling and brainstorming some of the things. And then here is an example of what I would be looking for. And I'm not sure about you, when I share this with my students, I'm like, these are the three sentences. This is your response. This is three sentences. The look on their face, like their face just drops. They're like, that's three sentences. That is so much. Um, but so in the short story, the Veldt author Ray Bradbury uses descriptive language to enhance the setting and conflict of the story to draw his audience in. So I'm explaining, why he's using that descriptive language, what his purpose is. He wants to draw the audience in. For example, as the parents are investigating the trouble in the nursery, they see, and then here's my seamless transition to the quote, and I pointed out to the students, if I'm saying it out loud, you shouldn't know where that quote starts unless if you know the text really well. The lions now, 15 feet away, so real, so feverishly and startlingly real that you could feel the prickling fur on your hand and your mouth was stuffed with the dusty upholstery smell of their heated pelts. There's a lot of descriptive language in that quote. And then it's cited. And then Bradbury's use of descriptive language enhances the story's setting of the nursery because he makes it seem so real that George and Lydia can actually taste and feel the Veldt. So that last part of sentence three is where I make the connection for the students. The fact that George and Lydia can taste and feel the Veldt, that's where I'm connecting to my quote because I can have them go highlight in the quote. Where do they taste it? Where do they feel it? And then they see, okay, this is how we analyze and not summarize. All right, so here's sentence one. In the short story, The Veldt, author Ray Bradbury uses descriptive language to enhance the setting and conflict of the story to draw his audience in. It has the GTAP, the genre, title, author, purpose. Here's sentence two. I'm going to go over these kind of quickly because we went over them, but I would point out to students the fact how we have our, for example, what's happening, our quote, and our citation. And then sentence three, providing commentary and analysis about the quote. And so that is really where I start with my students. Okay, so I'm gonna stop my share real fast. I'm gonna open it up. If you have any questions, we'll pause for just a moment before I go into some of the questions that I received beforehand. Um, if you want to take a look at the drive for just a moment or add any questions in, please take a moment to do that. Okay, it looks like there's no questions yet, but if one does come up, I'll go back in there. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and um, share my screen again. All right, so here we go. This is the document that you have. You have access to this this Google folder. So the few things that I want to go over is this will be one right here. All right, so right here, this is building concrete detail sentences. I got this organizer. I got this tool from my master teacher. I talk about her in the book. She is absolutely amazing. I have the privilege of now teaching at the same school as her, right across the quad from her. And I've kind of taken what she's given me and I've added to it. So when I'm teaching my students this 3 sentence prompt, I give them a copy of this. And with this, they keep it, and I usually put it on like an annoying color of paper, and I tell them to hold on to it, to save it forever. And like, this is the formula. A lot of my students like math and they are very mathematically oriented. And so I tell them this is your equation. If you follow this equation, your solution will be correct. So I tell them we start our sentence with a general transition, and that just kind of like alerts our audience, hey, I'm going to give you an example. So, for example, for instance, to illustrate, and then they set up the situation. So, for example, when, to illustrate, because, like what was happening during this time. Then they describe the situations, they give a brief description what's happening. They give an indicator, and this is something where I find a lot of the students struggle with. They'll just say the book says or the text says, and it's like, no, who is it? Oftentimes it's just the narrator. So like who the narrator says, if it's narration, or who is the character that said it, or the narrator describes like just what's going on. And then here's a list of strong verbs, the quote and the citation. And I gave them two examples from texts they are familiar with. So the two examples I have here, and I recommend you to make a copy of this and change it out to something that you use, is To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee. A lot. Actually, I think most of the ninth graders at my school read Mockingbird before they come to 10th grade. And so I have an example with Mockingbird. And then another one is The Story of an Hour. Since the story is so short, it's one that I use often. So you can take this, use it, edit it, change it how you need to. The other one is here is a color coded copy. Now, this is an activity that I do with my students in the classroom. I have them have all the highlighters out and all of the markers out, and I have them find one, two, three, four, five, six, seven different colors. And we color each of the labels. So general transition, set up the situation, describe the situation. So this will take half a class period to go over this. Um, we color code it, and then down for our examples, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Down for our examples, we actually highlight that part of the sentence. So for our general transition, for the first example, I've got for example. So I have all the students do that. And then I try to have them work ahead and share with their table mates what they think it is before we solidify it and answer it together. Then set up the situation. What do you think that is? And they're going to say, as the novel's theme unfolds. So that's like, for example, as this is happening. So set up the situation as the novel's theme unfolds. The describe the situation, they'd find to be Atticus helps Scout learn about courage when. And then we have he as our indicator, tells is the verb. And then we have our quote and our citation. So if you wanted this to, whoop, I didn't mean to do that again. If you wanted this to be longer than half a class period, going over the 3 sentences and going over this, you could have a bunch of different examples from text that the students are familiar with. And they can not only color code it, but then maybe you watch a Pixar short because those are like 5 minutes long, and you have them write their own for a prompt. That's another thing that I like to do is incorporate Pixar shorts a lot because you can teach a whole lesson using a short. All right, so you have that. Here is this document that I showed you all that you have. And just make a copy. It'll be completely editable for you. Um, and again, I recommend have this be your first short story of the school year. Play the audio, have the students draw and create sketch notes for what they hear, then show them the prompt, show them the three sentences, give them the building concrete detail sentences handout, and then go over the sample response together as like, hey, this is my expectation. I've modeled this for you. Now it's your turn. And then you can always go back to the sample response to have students compare their work to see where they're at. So you have this. And then the other one is one that's for story of an hour. Um, so it's essentially the same exact thing, but there's no prompt. This is where the students would actually do it. So in a three-sentence response, explain how Kate Chopin uses symbolism in her short story, The Story of an Hour, to enhance the theme or give the audience a greater understanding of the story. So for here, I have two different things, and I really emphasize that with the or, because this is typically one of our first assignments that I do. And I like to have students choose what they're going to write about. That way they feel more comfortable with their writing. So those are the four documents that are in your file. One second, I need to pull this down. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and screen's in the way. All right, let's go over some of the questions that I received beforehand. So thank you for those of you who submitted questions. There's one I didn't include because I didn't have an answer for, and so I'll be getting back on that one. But so here's one of the first questions. It is, what is your approach for students who have trouble even writing three sentences? I'm thinking about students who struggle with getting started, and I'm sure we've all been there before. It's like, for us, it feels like everything is laid out. We went over it. Hey, we even practically said the answer, or maybe we did say the answer in class, and they're still just staring at you blankly. So my best advice for this is that you know your students best. If you have some students who really struggle, maybe combine multiple strategies together, give them sentence frames, but maybe also you sit down with them or you brainstorm a list of ideas for them to use. This is also where group brainstorming really comes into play, where you dedicate maybe 5 minutes to even a whole entire class period of having students work together to create the most robust list of ideas that they could possibly create. That way, if they come up with possibly, let's say, 10 different things to write about, your struggling writer can choose one of those. Even if they didn't come up with it, they're still practicing their writing skills. And that is what is really, really important. So if you brainstorm a whole bunch of lists or brainstorm ideas, even that paper that I showed you, the building concrete detail sentences, that gives them a lot of ideas. Um, and with the sentence frames also, it's really, really helpful because you've started the sentence for them. So they're starting to fill in the blanks. So even if they are staring at you and they've got nothing on their paper, it's like, okay, well, how about you get started? Even though you don't know what you're going to write, I get that, I understand it. How about you just start writing the beginning of the sentence frame down and then tell them, maybe your idea will come to you as you're doing that. And oftentimes it does because they're starting to think and process what they want to write about. All right, so here was another question. Which strategy do I recommend teaching first? So I recommend starting small. I use the three-sentence writing prompt with strategies. I kind of went over the first thing that I do just because, the school year's coming up and this is how I start teaching writing. But I typically don't move on beyond three sentences for about 4 weeks. Um, what I do is I start with three sentences. And once I feel a good chunk of my classes have that, with honors, they're ready for that. But last year when I had college prep, which is general regular ed as well, it took a little bit longer. And even it took longer in my classes that were special ed collaboration classes where I had an aide. And so I'd wait until a good like 75-ish% of my students solidly had the three sentences down on their own. But that's still with the writing prompt. It's with the organizers. It's with talking about the prompt ahead of time and even brainstorming ahead of time. Um, So I start with the three. And then what I do after that is I move on to four. I just add on a fourth sentence where I ask them to go a little bit deeper with their analysis. Um, and another way that you can do this is, model one with your students using a Pixar short. I've kind of said that before, but the Pixar shorts are so great. You can watch a quick video in 5 minutes. It tells a whole complete story. And then you can kind of go through the prompt with your students or a prompt with your students, and they have a good example. So I recommend starting small, three sentences, make sure those students have that skill. And then sometimes I've noticed majority of my class, they have this skill down and it comes time to write an essay and they forget everything. And it's like, what happened? You were just doing so well. It's the same thing. And then I have them pull out their old writing and look at it, and then it kind of helps them. All right, here was another question. And I'm sure that we all can really, really feel this one. What is your stance on AI and or technology in the writing classroom? I feel so defeated by AI. It's a lot. I feel like I first have to say I completely understand and recognize the argument that AI is here, it's not going anywhere. I've also read the comparison arguments about how, like, it's the internet and it was the calculator and all of the comparisons that people are making. However, when it comes to teaching writing, I feel that there's really not a place for AI because I want to grade the students' writing. I want to see their writing. I want to hear their voice and not see what the computer says. So while I understand and recognize the argument that AI is not going anywhere, I really, really believe that our students need to have an understanding of basic writing skills. But also, I feel like they need to have that creative thinking and critical thinking thought process that needs to happen, um, where maybe they do experience writer's block and they're stuck and they're thinking, because that is really where the learning and the growth happens. So, what I've done, because I've dealt with a lot of student AI use and I've had a lot of issues with it, parent meetings, admin meetings, a whole bunch of stuff for all graded writing assignments where it's like, this is a summative grade. I need to see what you're doing. I've switched completely to in class writing. So that means, shorter essays, it means paragraphs. Uh, it can either be handwritten. Thankfully, my district uses Canvas and we have the Respondus lockdown browser. And so I put them on the lockdown browser so they can't exit. And if they do exit, I get alerted to that. Um, but anything that's graded is in class. So that's where I'm at with AI. All right. Here's another question. How would you alter these sentence frames for a research essay? This is one essay my students struggle with the most. So I would use and I would incorporate and I would give my students sentence frames that really focus on incorporating evidence from nonfiction, from articles. So I might give them, here's two examples. Research shows that, insert a key fact or statistic here. What does research show? Tell me, what does the article say? Which highlights the importance of. So we have this data now. Why is this so important? What does this prove? What does it help show? Or according to, the author, the article, or the source, give a quote demonstrating that. So here's our quote, but why is it so important? Demonstrating that. And then give an explanation of how it helps support the claim. So with research, I'd really focus on researching ahead of time and then focusing on embedding the quotes with the sentence frames. All right. So again, here's a list of strategies. We got mentor texts, color coding, sentence frames, sentence starters, and word banks. So I hope you all found this helpful. We've got a little bit of time if you'd like to. I'm gonna stop my share. Add anything in. got one question right here. Add any questions? Please add those to the chat right now and I'll go through them. So Marlene is asking, in a longer essay, would the G-tab serve as the thesis statement? The answer is yes. So when I transition from paragraphs to the essay, I do explain to my students that the GTAP is now kind of like your thesis statement, because in a paragraph, your topic sentence guides your paper, and an essay, your thesis, is what guides your paper. So we still need to have all of that information in there, like the genre, the title, the author, the purpose. But I do let them know, maybe if you're following the hook, background, thesis format, maybe you've already mentioned the author or the title in the background. Don't repeat it in the thesis statement. Or another good thing to do is, give me a hook and some background information that doesn't include the title and the author, and have that be part of your thesis statement. But yes, the GTAP, I would definitely transition that from topic sentence to thesis statement once you transition to a longer essay. All right, so here is another question. Where can you find the documents you shared? All right, I'm going to share them again. I had a couple people come in and I'm not sure if you were able to get it before, but there is I have to press enter. Okay, I put the Google Drive in the chat. So that is a view only copy to the Google Drive. So what you can do is you can go in, file, make a copy, move your copy to wherever you want, and then you can have it, you can edit it, you can hopefully you can use the Velt and have that be one of your first lessons of the school year. Uh, Hopefully that helps with some back to school planning and stress. I'm not sure when you all go back. I go back in 2 weeks, so it's here. All right, let's see. Can you explain how longer essays will work with only writing in class? All right. So this is going to depend on how long your class periods are. Um, Never before have I wanted to teach on a block schedule more than when I switched to only in class. So I start out with shorter essays, like a 3 paragraph, really, really quick introduction, basically like background information, thesis statement, give me your one body paragraph, and your conclusion is like 1 or 2 sentences. And so I don't really try to stick with page length or word count. I tell my students ideas. And so typically for paragraphs, I'll say I need at least 2 examples that support your topic sentence. Um, and then if you have shorter class periods like me, where I'm only in class for like 56 minutes, and on Fridays we're, I think, 51 or 48. I don't know. I've never counted the minutes, but on Fridays we have shorter times. What you could also do is maybe the day before your group writes the introduction, and then you have that already for the students, and then they write the 2 body paragraphs and the conclusion. Or maybe the day before you've brainstormed the ideas and you've got a list of quotes for them to use that you've come up with. That's going to help the time. But typically I found, like, with the timed, it's essentially a timed write, with the timed writing and the in-class writing, students, we see that they write a lot faster. I used to do like 1 paragraph a day in class and it really, really dragged, but now the students, they're typing more, and I grade it as, like, it's not polished. It definitely is in class. And we can always go back and take a look at what we did and improve it, but we're not getting a grade for what's improved, only because then we have access to all the fun AI tools that they love to use. Um, So, Marlene, I'm not sure if that answer helped, or I'm not sure if you have specific page requirements that you have to do. I know that at my school, okay, good, it did. Our dual enrollment senior class, they have the community college professor comes in and they have to write like 5-page papers, and it has to be 5 pages. Um, I remember those in college, just stretching my words. All right. Are there any Any more questions? See, Sandra, you go back August 4th. Me too. Although we have students on August 6th. I wish we had more time, but it is what it is. Okay, I'm gonna give it just a moment to see if there's any more questions. However, right now I am going to go ahead and stop recording.